My name is Matthew Leal. I'm on the business intelligence team at Square.
I'm Tristan Gosnell. I also do BI at Square.
We're here to talk to you today about the migration that we did off of Vertica onto Snowflake. So as we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about what sort of Square looks like right now. Thanks. So Square is actually, we have a decentralized data structure. So we have a lot of different analytics teams that operate autonomously. And so the business intelligence team sits in the middle of that. But we do have a lot of different people using Looker. So we have 30 different Looker projects. And again, most of those have dozens of different things. Most of those are centered around a particular product of Square's. So Square Cash, Square Capital, the regular register that most people are used to. And on those, we have 400 different users with developer access. So it's, again, a very decentralized process. A lot of people have ownership of their own data. And within those, we have 1,500 different explorers. So it's a very sprawling instance in terms as far as Looker goes.
So why Snowflake? I think Snowflake has a pretty big presence here. I imagine most of you are pretty familiar already. But obviously, scalability, right? But it's not just scalability. I mean, scalability really means so much more. It's not just bigger and faster. It's elastic. It scales up with demand. It auto-suspends when you're not using it. So with Vertica at Square, we were really dealing a ton with this noisy neighbor problem. So we have about 1,000 weekly users. And that definitely peaks Monday mornings, right? Everybody comes in Monday morning. They want to see their reports from last week. And it's even worse during month end, quarterly times too. And then sometimes with Vertica, our ETLs wouldn't even be done by like 9 a.m. on Monday morning. And we'd have users in there trying to get their data. Everything would just be running into each other. Sometimes we even just had to lock users out so that ETLs could finish and so everybody could get their data. So with Snowflake, what's really cool is that we can isolate ETLs from ad hoc usage, and we can even, using Looker's API, we can set the organization for each individual user and template that connection to Snowflake and send them to their own individual warehouse, which is what Snowflake calls compute. So teams are isolated from each other, which is really cool. Yeah.
So the switch to Vertica, or the switch off of Vertica onto Snowflake, we did it using a replication strategy where we had a temporary database within Snowflake that just mirrored Vertica. So the entire Vertica ETL process would still happen as usual. And the very end of that, we would just take a data dump of all of the new Vertica tables and replicate them into Snowflake. This allowed all of our views to be in. And then within Snowflake, developers could put in views to read directly from that not Vertica database into the more permanent space, while the rest of the ETL engineering was happening within Snowflake, which allowed things to be replaced incrementally.
Yeah, so Square has a pretty incredible data infrastructure team. And they handle nearly 100% of the extract and load part of the ETL process. But those pipelines take a while to build, and we didn't want to wait for all that to be ready. We wanted to start sooner. So BI built a replication from Vertica to Snowflake, which worked pretty well, but it was about a one-day lag for the data there. But that's okay for a lot of use cases. So a lot of our most important reports are weekly or quarterly reports. So this was a perfect use case for this replicated data going into not Vertica. And the way we handle that is we create two models for each project. And you use a label so they show up identical in the Explorer interface, and it's completely transparent to the user. They don't notice that there's one Vertica model and one Snowflake model. They just click on the same Explorer they've been used to. And I think something that a lot of new Looker users, especially, even some more advanced Looker devs may not realize this if they're in a one project, one model kind of world. But views are really just metadata. There's no connection inherent to a view. And so having that second model, you can just import all your same views, and most of the time they just work. As you know, as long as you're not using anything that's too database specific in any of your dimensions or measures. So anyways, switching over to some of these most important things really helps spread out that load, and it made an immediate difference, especially for those people whose reports are now pointing to Snowflake. Their reports actually loaded on Monday morning. It was great. But yeah, also the thing about not Vertica is the database not Vertica. Most companies probably only have one database in Snowflake, but as we were migrating, not just with the compute elasticity, we also wanted to take advantage of elasticity in storage too. And so we decided that what were formerly schemas in Vertica, we wanted those to be databases, because that's where Snowflake actually tracks storage costs. And so we wanted to be able to track not just compute, but also storage across the entire cluster. For many companies, just having the not Vertica or the warehouse database, your migration might have stopped there or been much simpler. But because we wanted to take advantage of that billing at the database level, we had to do some more complex things in our migration with Looker.
This strategy also allowed for while data engineers were working on the ETL process upstream, it also allowed for downstream reports and Vertica stuff to be, or Looker stuff to be transferred over a lot easier, and they could, both teams could work in parallel. So the schedule for our migration, we started in earnest in May and June of this year. We sort of had a proof of concept earlier in the year, but May and June is when we really started to push our Looker developers to start moving. The idea was to be fully off of Vertica by September. But again, we have over 1,500 explorers, so this was a rather ambitious timeline that we'd set out for ourselves.
So I personally flipped that switch in Looker, turning Vertica off, and man, did it feel good. That was at the end of September, just a few weeks ago. So it was definitely an aggressive timeline, but we actually only pushed that date back one time. I think with all the things that we've learned, I think we probably could have been more aggressive even. Knowing what we know now. But a lot of it was just really down to waiting for upstream dependencies.
So, and we wanted it to be mostly transparent to end users. We have a lot of people who aren't involved with Looker at all, except from a consumer standpoint. And the idea was that we wanted it to be sort of seamless in terms of transition for them. So with 400 developers, how do we shepherd them through, how did we shepherd the masses? We came up with a couple different strategies that we recommended to people, and we tried to get them to be a little more sticky. We tried to name them after superheroes. So the first one was Daredevil, and this involved just changing the connection in your model from Vertica to Snowflake and seeing what breaks. It's bold, and not recommended really, but if you're a Daredevil, why not? The more recommended strategy we originally referred to as the Flash, which was what we did was we built a parallel model for all of the existing models. We built a new one, and that one would be connected to Snowflake. The old one was connected to Vertica, and then you could go through surgically and just move things over one explorer at a time. And then once you've moved it over, you just go use the content validator on the front end to move over whatever looks in dashboards to repoint them to the new Explorer. What we quickly found was that the content validator with our sprawling instance of Looker just takes between 8 to 10 minutes for every single run. And what we quickly found was Flash was more like Flash Slothmore, the endearing sloth from Disney's hit movie Zootopia. And it really just wasn't able to scale in a way that we needed it to. The other thing we learned from this was that some views, like Tristan was talking about, views are just metadata, and that some views would need to be used on both Vertica and on Snowflake at the same time. So we were able to use Liquid to mark it up. So Liquid conditionals to say if the connection string is Vertica, use the old way. If the connection string is Snowflake, use the new way. And we realized that we could apply this across the board. So who works with explorers in a bilingual manner? Dora the Explorer. So she was our big solution to all of this. And it really became a verb that people used around the company. Yeah, we're using the door explore method. We're going to door explore it. So that was fun. But one thing that needed to happen was that people needed, this had to be done manually most of the time for any custom SQL that was used. And we needed a quick way that people could convert their Vertica SQL into Snowflake syntax.
So I built a tool called Vertica Snow, or as I later started calling it, Vertigo Away. It started as this like Hack Week project at the beginning of our Snowflake POC, and I really just wanted to see like how many of our SQLs could I convert in an automatic fashion. It turned out just like in that one Hack Week, it's like somewhere around 80+%. So I kept hacking at it, kept working away, and eventually I think I got probably 90 to 95% success rate, and developed this tool, which is both it's a Python library and it's a little like Dockerized web app that we deployed on our Corp network. So users could use this to quickly convert their syntax. It also, like I said, because we moved our schemas to databases, we had a canonical list from data infrastructure of that mapping, and I built that into Vertica Snow too, so people, maybe you didn't know where your dependencies were in this new world, and Vertica Snow, you could just put it in there, and there they are for you. So it even works in LookML. You can actually like put your entire view or model in there, and it'll actually convert SQL within LookML, which is really nice. But anyway, a little about some sticking points, the kind of conversions that are done here. Most of it is really just like taking away some Vertica specific things and extracting those out. But most common, what users are going to find is kind of date math things, like when you do current date minus interval or current date minus 1. Those are the kind of things that unfortunately Snowflake doesn't support. So this just automatically does those conversions for you. It's not quite open source yet, maybe one day. But if you're planning to do a migration in Snowflake in the future, just reach out to your rep. And I've already promised them that I'll hand this over. Obviously, it's designed with Vertica in mind, but I think it'll probably work pretty well with most database technologies like Redshift or Postgres. Because like I said, mostly it's just kind of getting rid of the Vertica specific things. So some more of the sticking points here. So kind of from the beginning, we knew a database migration was going to be coming eventually, and I've always kind of thought that custom like derived tables with custom SQL have been an anti-pattern in Looker, and so we couldn't automate, or we didn't want to automate converting those. But I provided people with a Vertica Snow tool. One of the great things about Looker, though, is that projects are Git repos. So I cloned about all 30 of them locally, wrote a simple bash script or Python script, and found every place that we use SQL table name in a view, and was able to replace that with using Liquid again, the if dialect is Snowflake, point it to the new Snowflake table. Otherwise, keep it to the old Vertica table. And this really, really made the door the explorer method much faster, because I could do this across the entire instance. And the other thing, like I said, anti-pattern with the native, with the derived tables, the people that I taught how to use native derived tables didn't have this problem. So I don't know if you guys have seen this. It was released last year, but native derived tables are awesome. It's like the native built-in LookML way to do those derived tables, and everyone that took advantage of those didn't have to deal with the pain of finding all their views and running it through Vertica Snow.
One final problem we had was hash keys. That we had a bunch of joins that relied on hash keys, and Vertica and Snowflake, of course, have different proprietary ways of hashing. And so it led to a bunch of broken joins that we had to deal with. But beyond that, it was relatively painless, quick. So what's the future road plan moving forward? We've actually been migrating for the last 2 years. Last year, we spent migrating off of Tableau and onto Looker, and this year we migrated off of Vertica onto Snowflake. So it is a kind of a new time for us on BI at Square. first order of business is cleaning up the bilingual syntax. We have a lot of vestigial stuff in there now that is just not as useful as it once was. We do plan on finding better ways to police derived tables and to figure out, to crack down on the people that are doing that. It was kind of nice that this transition was hard for those people. It kind of allowed us to say, I told you so, which we kind of did with like a little feather in our cap, like, hey, I see that it's taking you a really long time to migrate. Maybe clean it up. And we're going to continue to scale. And a lot of it has been, the last 2 years have been a huge learning experience for us, and so it is a lot about implementing the best practices that we've learned along the way on some of that stuff that we did right at the beginning.